Okay, welcome to this solution walkthrough for the MECC Case Excelgram. This is the Varsity edition. It's a case all about a fictional social network, and we are supplied with a bunch of user data here. So we have user IDs, what their name and date of birth is, and their main interest, and also the crucial piece of information here is the other users that they follow. So some of these strings of information are quite short, some are very long, and the theme of the case is kind of counting how many people you follow and how many people follow you. So let's get into it. I'm going to do the bonuses last and solve all of the questions first. So question one here is simply providing us with a user ID and asking us what their name is. So this is a typical lookup, so we could use something like an XLOOKUP. We're going to specify what we want to search for, and the next argument is where we want to search for it, so that's going to be in this column B. We need to remember to lock our column, and that's F4, and then our final argument is where we want to return from. So we're going to look for the ID in column B and return what's in the same position in column C. So that will give us our name. So question two is where we're going to start counting. So we're given a user ID and we want to know how many people they follow. Well, all of the people they follow is listed here and we need to count them. So the idea is to find something that splits all of the user IDs, and we can see that we're provided with that luckily, and we have a / to do that. So let's copy one of our headers to be consistent with the layout, and let's say number following. And we can say text split this string on that /, and that will give us all of the individual user IDs in their own cell. And then the final step is to count how many cells there are. So we could use a number of formulas for this. Count A is one that works. I like to use columns when I have an array, and that's just going to count how many columns are in something. You can also have rows as an equivalent formula if something's spelled down instead of across. So let's say columns of that stuff, and it will tell us how many items there are. And now we've transformed the question into another XLOOKUP. So let's look for our user ID in column B and lock it and return the column G, which is the number of people that user is following. So we can drag that down and that should give us all the answers. All right, on to question three. This is asking us for each given user, how many followers do they have? So it's the opposite way around to what we just did. So if we take this first row, for example, we've already calculated how many people they follow. They were all listed. Now we want to know how many people follow user F0500. So what we're really asking is how many times that user ID appears in all of the other lists of followers. And to do this, we're going to use the search formula. And it's quite intuitive. What it does is searches for a string inside another string. So I'm going to pick up a random user ID here. Let's put that out here. And then I can say search. And the first argument is the thing you want to search for. And the next argument is where you want to search for it in. So I'm going to search for that string in our list of followings there, and that gives us 43. So that means this user has successfully been found in this wall of text, and it's at the 43rd character position. Now the interesting thing about the search formula is that we can search among arrays, so that will give us all of the positions that this user appears in all of those strings. And where it's successful, we'll get a number, and where it's not successful, we'll get an error. So we're going to leverage this technique to say equals search for this user in all of these strings, and we'll have to remember to lock it, so F4 to lock it, and we're going to get a list of errors and numbers. So we want to check where that's a number, so we're going to wrap that in isNumber, and if it's a number, it means we've successfully found the user. So the goal is to count the values that are true, and the quickest way to do that is to wrap the formula inside a minus minus. So if you put minus minus in front of a list of trues and falses, it will convert them to ones and zeros. You can also do other mathematical operations. So you could do 1 times this thing and you'll get the same result. I just prefer to use minus minus. So final step is to use the sum formula to get how many there are. So let's drag that down, and again we now have the question answered for all users. So let's copy this and we can put number of followers. And then once again, we've transformed the question into an XLOOKUP. So we're going to look for the user ID in the user data, column B, and return this final column H for how many people are following them. And let's drag that down. Question 4 is asking us if the given user is an influencer. And there are 2 criteria that need to be true for a person to be considered an influencer. The first is that they have at least twice as many followers than people they follow. And the second is they have at least 450 followers. So again, let's build this out in the table. And I may not have explained before, but whenever I have a case like this, I tend to answer the question for everybody instead of a given subset of people that are asked in the question, because it gives you the flexibility that later they might ask about calculations involving these things for different users than you were presented with earlier. So it's always best to try and spill out the information for everyone if you can. So let's say influencer, and we have two conditions. So the way we can evaluate two conditions is we can use the AND formula. And our first condition is that the number of followers has to be greater than or equal to 2 times the number of people they follow. Then we could put a comma and determine our second condition, and the second condition is that the followers is greater than or equal to 450. So if we enter that, it will give us a true or false. So we can then finally wrap it in if, and then say, so if that's true, then yes, they are an influencer. Otherwise, no, they are not an influencer. So let's spell that down. And again, we have another XLOOKUP. So let's XLOOKUP the given user in the table, column B, and return column I, our new influencer column. Okay, level 5 is where the case gets a little bit more tricky, and we're specified with a user ID and a main interest. And the goal is to find out how many followers that person has that has the same interest as them. So earlier on, I think it was question 3, we calculated how many followers each of the users have. This time we actually need to know who those people are and what their interest is. So let's build it up over here so you can see it. We're going to use our search trick again to say search for this user ID in this list here, and we'll lock it. What that's going to do is give us a list of numbers wherever the user ID appears. We can say isNumber, and that will give us a list of trues and falses. So each one of these trues and falses corresponds to one row in this table. So there'll be a true and a false for every single row. And wherever there's a true, it means that the ID in the table follows our given user. And we're going to use this list of trues and falses inside the filter formula. So what the filter formula does is it takes an array that you want to filter, and let's lock it, and then an array of true and false conditions that has to be the same size, and will filter everything in your first argument for where there's a true in the second argument. So this is a list of all of our followers. So we have 553 followers. However, one nice thing about the filter formula is that you can filter on multiple conditions. So the way I do that is I normally wrap them in brackets like this, because you need to multiply the arrays of trues and falses together. So inside this first bracket, we use our list of trues and falses here. And inside the second bracket, we need to spill a list of trues and falses for our interest. So let's say does this column here, and lock it, equal our given interest, and that is here. So if I spill that, you'll see we're reduced to 28 total users, and that matches the example. So we just need to count them, just like we used the columns formula earlier. I'll use the rows formula here, wrap that whole thing in rows, and then we have our answer. And then the final thing to do is to move this formula inside the other one. So let's replace this with that formula, and we have a truly single cell answer to this question. So let's move that here, drag it down, and there we go. So that's all of our answers for that question. Okay, next up, question 6. So this is exactly the same thing, but we're adding one more criteria, and that's that the gender is the same. So let's just pull this formula down for a second. So I'm moving it to that column just so I can simply copy paste it. Let's press F2 to enter it, and we can see that this blue box is referencing the wrong cell. So let's move that to ID, and there we go. Now we just need to add our final condition that the gender is the same. So let's add a column for that. So I'm going to press insert here, and let's call it sex, and let's say equals text before this cell and the dash, because that's where our information is. So text before just takes in a text string, a character or multiple characters, and gives you everything that occurs before that delimiter. And now we know how to add multiple criteria to filter. Let's add a third. So multiplied by, open bracket, close bracket, and then inside those brackets for our third condition, we're going to say does this, and lock that column, equal our specified gender here. And there we go, we get 12 matching the example. So let's just drag that down and copy it into the answers. Okay, on to question 7. This one's kind of multi-layered. We want to take all influencers and their followers, and then out of those followers, count how many match the given criteria here. Once we've done that for all of the influencers, we want to return the name of the influencer that has captured the most of these followers. So in level 6, we learned how to filter on multiple things, and here we actually have 4 criteria. So it's the interest, the sex, the year has to be at least 1995, but at most 2000 on their birth year. So let's just grab the birth year from this column here. So let's add a new column and let's say birth year. And to pull out the year from a date field, we can simply say year of this date, and that will pull out the year. It's currently formatted as a date, so we just need to change that back to a number. And what you'll see, that gives us just the year out of this date. So let's just spill out this year range here. So we can say text split the year on a dash. And these are currently formatted as text. Any text formulas that you use, like text split, mid, left, right, will result in text instead of numbers. We want these to be numbers. You can tell they're text because they're left aligned. If we multiply it by 1, they become right aligned, so we know they're numbers. So let's just drag that down for everybody. And now let's find all of our users that match those criteria. So let's use our filter again. So we're going to filter all of the users, and let's lock that. And then we have 4 criteria. So I'm going to set this up with 4 sets of brackets and then close our filter. So the first criteria is that the gender matches. So let's lock that and say equals this given sex here. And then in our next bracket, let's do the main interest. So the main interest, which is over here, and let's lock that, equals our main interest here. Then let's do our date of births. So the date of birth here, and lock it, has to be greater than or equal to the minimum year. And then we can just copy that again because the maximum bound is going to be the same type of filter. So just make sure we grab all of it. And then let's change our greater than or equal to a less than or equal to and the end year. So that's all of our users that match that criteria. So there's 7 people in this bucket, and then we want to check for all of the influencers how many people out of this bucket of 7 follow them. So let's think about what information we need from the influencers group. So of course we're going to need their name because that's what the answer is going to be. We're going to need their user ID to match against this. And we're also going to need their number of followers because it says in the question, if there's a tie, then the one with the most followers overall will win. So let's use the HStack formula and grab the columns we want. So we want the ID, we want the name, and we want the number of followers. So if I just show you what that looks like, it will give us the full table, but only those 3 columns. And then we can filter that for where this column for the influencer, and let's lock it, equals a yes. So now this is our influencer data. Okay, now that we have the list of all of the influencers and all of the users in our bucket, what we'd like to do is find out who these people follow and then check if it matches this username, then this username, then this username, and so on. You might not be able to visualize that yet, so let's try and build it up slowly. But the first thing I'm going to do is use a let to simplify this formula a bit. So I'm going to say let users be that stuff. And then I'm going to do a comma and press Alt-Enter to go to a new line. Let's put some spaces just so it's a bit cleaner. Now I want to find all of the people that these users follow. So I can say XLOOKUP our users. So that's this array here. I want to XLOOKUP that in our user data. So let's grab those from there. And what I want to return is the list of all the people they follow. So let's just show you what that looks like if I close our brackets. So it's converted them into the list of followers. And now I want to do my search trick again to see how many times this user shows up in these lists. So if I just show you what that looks like individually, I can say search for this user in this list. And it will tell us where it appears. So there are 5 numbers here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of this bucket of 7 users follow the first influencer. So let's build that in. Let's say following is that part of the formula. Let's add a new line and let's say search for this thing in our following. Let's close that. So that gives us all the numbers. And then we want to do our isNumber trick. So isNumber, turn it to trues or falses, and then do the sum of minus minus that thing in brackets. So that gives us 5. Okay, now the final piece of the puzzle is to apply this calculation to all of the influencers. Right now, we've only applied it to the very first influencer. And we can see that 5 people follow them. We need to do that for every influencer and find out which one has the most. And there's a formula that does exactly that called map. So what map does, if we say map, we can enter an array and then we can do a calculation for every item in that array. So let's just lock that. And we need to put this inside a lambda. So we say lambda, and then we specify a letter or a word or anything we like. So let's say influencers, and then we need to change our cell calculation here to be whatever was written in that lambda, so it's influencers. Now I prefer to just use A just because it's quicker to type. As long as these two things match, it will work. So let's close our brackets, and what you'll see is we spill the calculation for actually this entire table. So let's pull it back over here. Now it looks like we're going to have some draws here. So what we need to do is sort the list of influencers according to how many of the people in this bucket follow them. That's these numbers. And then secondly, on how many total followers they have. So let's say sort by this list. We want to sort this list based on those numbers that we just calculated. And we want it to be descending. So that's the next argument. So -1 is descending. We want it to be biggest number to smallest number. The next array we want to sort by is the total number of followers. This is our secondary sorting if there's a draw. Let's lock that. Let's actually lock our first piece as well. And again, we want to sort that descending. So that will give us all of the influencers in the order that match the question. So we can see Joseph Morgan is at the top. So to take just the first one, we could put the @ symbol in front of it. We get Joseph Morgan. If we spill that down, that will be all of our answers. So that was an involved level 7, but hopefully that made some sense. Now let's do the bonus questions. So the first one is asking who the oldest user in the data is. So the easiest way to do this one is probably just Control-Shift down right to highlight the whole table, Control-Shift-L to add filters to the top, and then we can just sort for oldest to newest. That will give us the oldest person first, whoever was born first. That's our answer. Okay, bonus question 2, we want the average number of followings for all female users. So we can say average ifs, and we want the average followings, that's this number, for where this says F. And we need to round that to the nearest integer. So we can say round that to 0 decimal places, so 249. Okay, bonus 3, how many users have more followings than followers? So let's just do it out here so you can see the workings. We want to check if these numbers is greater than these numbers, and that will give us a list of trues and falses for all of these rows. And again, let's convert to numbers and sum them up. So sum of minus minus, open brackets, and close both our brackets. So it's 430. So 430. Question 4, which user's date of birth is closest to the average date of birth? Again, I'll spill it over here just so you can see what's happening. So first of all, I need to calculate the average date of birth. So dates are actually just numbers in Excel, so we can just say average of those. And then we want to find the difference between that and all the other dates. So let's minus off all of the dates. So we'll get a big list of how far away things are. However, we'll probably get some negatives, and we want to eliminate those because we only care about the absolute difference, and it can be above or below. So if we wrap that in abs, it will change all of the negatives to positives. And now what we'd like to do is sort all of the names according to this array, smallest to biggest, because the smallest number is the least far away from the average birth date. So let's say sort by these usernames by this array, and the default sort order is smallest to largest anyway, so that will give us the order as so, and we just want the first one. So it's actually the case author, which is pretty cool. Final bonus, which letter occurs most often in the names of the answers to level 7? So let's come to level 7, and we want to check all of the letters here and count how many of each there are. So to spill an alphabet, you don't really want to be typing it like this. The quicker way is to say equals sequence of 26, because there's 26 letters in the alphabet. We can wrap that in char to get the characters of them. However, the character A starts at number 65, so we'll start our sequence at 65. So character of sequence of 26 starting at 65, you'll get the alphabet. The next step I want to do is concatenate, so concat all of this stuff so it's in one string, like so. Let's just spell it that way. However, let's just make sure the case is the same, so my alphabet is uppercase, so let's make this uppercase by wrapping it in upper, like so. So one way we can count letters is to take the length of a string, so that's len, it just tells us how many characters there are, 229. And what we're going to do is a little trick where we're going to substitute out, so substitute takes in a text. What's the old text? Let's say it's an A. What's the new text? A blank. What that's going to do is eliminate all of the A's from that string. So we can see Eric Martin changes to Eric M-R-T-I-N. So if we take the length of that, that will be the length of the string excluding A's. So the difference between those two numbers is how many A's there are. So let's say length of the string minus len of substitute the string. The old letter is this, and the new letter is blank. And let's just lock that cell there and that cell there. And if we drag that down, we should be able to see all of the letters. We can immediately see that A is the most popular with 27 occurrences. So our answer is A. And that's it, how to solve Excelgram. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the YouTube comments. I'll come and check in periodically and answer those. And I'll see you next time.
When you're playing at the highest level, you can't guess. You need to trust every movement. When you're playing for everything, your gear has to be perfect. The shape, the speed, the precision, all of it has to feel right. Built with pros, made for esports.